Has US President Donald Trump's comment that Russian President Vladimir Putin has gone absolutely crazy in carrying out intense bombardments on Ukrainian cities in the past few days signal a significant change of policy or just momentary frustration? That is a question being keenly debated in Ukraine as death and destruction continue to sweep across its cities. To understand how Kyiv sees Trump's comment and beyond, MCR spoke to Inna Sovsun, a member of Ukrainian parliament and one of the strongest articulators of her country's position on the war with Russia. Inna spoke to MCR from Kyiv. Welcome to my Chai Reports, Inna. It's always a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me again.
How do you view President Trump's comment that Putin has gone absolutely crazy in continuing his bombardments on Ukraine?
Well, if he had gone crazy, this certainly didn't happen over the last weekend, though the last weekend has been terrifying, particularly for people here in Kyiv. It was terrifying nights. None of us had almost no sleep over the nights, and that was indeed very intense bombing of the city itself. But again, it wasn't something new. It wasn't even something that hasn't happened before in Kyiv, or I'm not even talking about some other cities. So the war has started. This intense war has started in 2022, and we have been living through that for 3.5 years. And the war altogether on the east and the south of the country started in 2014. So if Putin has gone crazy, this certainly happened way earlier than last weekend.
In the specific context of the way President Trump has seen this whole conflict, do you see this as momentary frustration or signaling a significant change of policy?
Well, it's hard to say as of right now, because we'll have to wait and see how he will proceed from here. From what we are seeing, President Trump is prone to some unexpected decision-making processes, to put it mildly. On the other hand, in that very post on his social media, where he said that Putin has gone crazy, he also mentions that President Zelensky is doing no good to Ukraine by what he's saying and what he's doing. So I do think that there is still a part of Trump that really just doesn't like Zelensky altogether, and I don't think that those personal feelings are helping. But the very fact that he spoke publicly about Putin doing something wrong, I think it's an important step in the right direction. I'm not sure if we are far enough in that direction as of yet. So we'll have to wait and see, and we'll have to see if they will be willing to impose some pressure on Russia, because what we have been seeing over the last 3 months of different types of negotiations is actually U.S. press in Ukraine. They've never tried to pressure Russia. So that is what we that would be the indicator that it's not just temporary frustration, but actually the change of understanding of the situation.
But having said what he said, he has never said this before, that he has gone absolutely crazy. Can he really walk back from that to 180 degrees and say things are fine?
That wouldn't be unprecedented with President Trump, no?
Okay.
The bigger question is, will Putin be able to take it, to forget that? Because he remembers everything, and they have certainly they have heard this message. We have seen the reaction from the Russian side. They reacted very harshly as well. They didn't like that statement. So I think they will remember that. Will this mean that Trump will now proceed in one direction only? I'm not sure that we can be guaranteeing that.
Right. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has said in response to Trump's remarks that the president is not sufficiently informed about the way Ukraine has been bombing Russian cities. So basically, he's saying that it's just tit for tat right now.
Yeah. Well, what else they could have said, right?
Right.
I think that they had to respond it one way or another, and they just keep on lying about, pretending that Ukraine and Russia are on equal terms and in equal situation, and so on and so forth, which is of course not true. Of course, they have been destroying our cities for over 10 years now, very intensely in the big-scale invasion for 3 years now. I visited my native city of Kharkiv very recently. I was shocked to what extent, because here in Kyiv there have been bombings, of course, and all of that. But Kyiv is a very big city, and it's not like you regularly walk past some buildings which have been bombed. But actually, as of last couple of weeks, I actually have a building right now where I live, like 5 minutes walk from my home, which has been hit by Russians. I had a couple of weeks ago, which was very scary. But in Kharkiv, it's like you walk around the city center and every, I don't know, 10th, 15th building is actually destroyed. And that's very painful to see. And that's uncomparable to the attacks on military infrastructure on the Russian cities that Ukraine is committing right now.
That begs the question in my mind that I'm curious to know whether the political conversation on the street is changing after over 3 years of this. Is there conflict fatigue developing, or you think people are still very much invested in Ukraine taking on Russia?
Well, people are invested, but of course there is fatigue. Look, I can say that from my own perspective. My partner has been on the front lines from day one of this war, and it's not like every other day is like the day before. It's actually every new day is more difficult to bear all of that than the day before, and of course this fatigue is getting more and more, and then people are getting tired and frustrated. It's extremely difficult to live in a situation where you can't plan your future, you can't plan. I can't plan my weekend.
Right.
And I'm not even talking about holidays for the summer or any more than that. So of course people are getting tired. Of course people are, as of right now, if you look at the pollings done, people are more willing for a kind of midway solution. In 2022, I think absolute majority of Ukrainians were saying that we have to get to the borders of 2014. So the official borders. I think now there is a growing number of people who say we have to stabilize the conflict. We have to stop the active phase of the war. We cannot give up on our territory legally, but more people are ready to accept that they are temporarily occupied and we are not actively fighting to get it back. And we wait for the right political, geopolitical moment when this can happen. Putin is not going to live forever. And maybe someday this moment will come, but I do think that living in this terror for 3.5 years is just extremely difficult. And that is why people are more willing to accept kind of midway solution, which is not ideal, but and it cannot be on Russia's term, because what they're suggesting is basically, Ukraine's capitulation on the other terms, but it's not what we are ready to accept. But I think one way or another, just to stabilize the front line, to stop the active phase of the war, is something that majority of Ukrainians are now ready to accept as an outcome.
Speaking of territory, Russia has barely gained about 0.6% of Ukraine's territory in the past year or so total. In the process, hundreds of thousands of people have died and have been wounded, death and destruction everywhere. Do you think, as you pointed out, that there may be a willingness to let that be the case now, that let the territory be the way it is, let the Russians continue to have what they control in east and south, I believe, and then the Crimean Peninsula also remains with them in return? The West supports Ukraine both militarily and economically and helps it get back on its feet. Do you think that's a possible deal that might happen?
Well, I think that is something that Ukraine will be ready to accept. I'm not sure if that is something that Russia will be willing to accept, though, because when we are there are now new talks about new negotiations on June the 2nd, which is on Monday, and they have laid out the new list of their demands, and they again include things which are unacceptable to us, including things like public statement that Ukraine will not be joining NATO, not supporting Ukraine militarily, which is that is suicidal, right? So we say, okay, we're not building our army any longer, and then what? Like, what are the guarantees that they will not attack us in a week or a month after that? That's of course not something that would just be stupid to accept. So the question is not so much about Ukraine and our willingness to negotiate. It's very much about what Russia is willing to negotiate about and to compromise on. And the truth is that they will only be willing to compromise on their demands if they feel strong pressure from the Western allies. If they feel that if they don't do something, then new sanctions will come over. If they don't do something, then Ukraine will get, 100 of F-16 fighter jets and all of that. If that is not available, if those kind of pressure on Russia is not available, then it just makes no sense for Russia to take on any of the demands from the Ukrainian and Western side, right? So I think that it's critically important how the West, the collective West, will behave right now. And will Trump just limit himself to claiming that Putin has gone crazy, or will he actually, say that if that doesn't happen, let's say if they don't make a deal by end of June, then the bill that is pending in the Congress about sanctions, then it will move forward, right? They have to set up the deadline, because I very much appreciate what the congressmen and women are doing right now. They're saying that there is a bill which has, absolute support in the Senate to impose sanctions on the countries buying energy sources from Russia. It's good, but this only works as a threat if there is a timeline to that.
Right.
So I think that is important to attach the timeline.
Right. How do you respond to the perspective that if there is a rare earths deal, it would make it incumbent on the U.S. to support Ukraine in the face of any aggression from Russia?
I do not believe that is going to be the strongest element. So we showed our willingness to cooperate by signing this deal. We showed that we want long-term partnership, economic partnership with the United States. We actually see this type of deal as beneficial to all the sides in this situation. Actually, absolute majority of the parliament, myself included, supported the ratification of that bill in the parliament. And there was generally, after some panic on the Ukrainian side, I think after all, what we came up with together, our government, US government, is actually something that can benefit both countries. But that will not stop the war per se, and that will not per se give a very strong reason for the US to intervene. I think something more needs to be added to that. And that is why we have been talking about, of course, about some security guarantees, but we had to delay that conversation.
Right. Just last couple of political questions. What is the status of the parliamentary elections? I believe your election law says that they must be held within 60 days of lifting the martial law, and 90 days for the presidential elections, I suppose.
You are very well informed about Ukraine's legislation. There is a slight difference, but it's not very significant. Truth be told, of course, there are some politicians in the parliament, logically for any country, who are now actively preparing for the elections. That doesn't include me. It's very difficult for me to think about elections because, as I mentioned, with my loved one on the front line, the only thing I can think about is him being safe and making sure that he stays safe. And I do believe that, and I'm happy to say that majority of Ukrainian politicians think the same, that the politicians who think about how to win elections cannot win wars. Politicians who are thinking, how to make sure that people like you cannot make the decisions that need to be made during the wartime. So, do I want for elections to take place? Yes, of course, that would be good. We are part of democracy. Unlike Russia, we actually hold in elections. We're actually changing our leaders and people in the parliament and so on and so forth. But I just cannot No, I think it would be a betrayal of those on the front lines if I will be thinking about elections right now, or if any other politicians will be thinking about elections right now, because we have to concentrate on the survival of the country first.
And in your judgment, even President Zelensky is not thinking, given that he has gained some popularity, especially in the aftermath of his confrontation with President Trump. Do you think that might tempt him to do it sooner than you expect?
Look, the reality is that he still cannot do that until we lift the martial law.
Right.
And we can only lift the martial law when there is like realistically safe situation in the country. When we can open up the airspace, we can't fly from the country for 3.5 years. We have to take a train to Poland to travel anywhere. It's we are living under very uncomfortable conditions, and only when we reestablish security, then we can lift the martial law. And I do think that once that happens, I think are there some people in President's team who are thinking that maybe we can use this opportunity when he has more popularity than he had before? Maybe so, but I also think they did some calculation thinking that, okay, elections can only take place after martial law is lifted. Martial law can only be lifted when there is some sort of ceasefire agreement. Whatever ceasefire agreement we're going to get right now is not going to be 100% of what we wanted. It's still going to be some sort of compromise. So I think that that's going to affect the popularity of the president as well. And I think they starting to understand that as well, right? So yes, there was a surge of his popularity after the we call incident in the Oval Office, but I think they understand that it will actually, get down very rapidly after any type of ceasefire, and any type of ceasefire, the precondition for lifting the martial law and elections.
And to conclude, do you think Moscow also wants elections because they presume that they may be able to influence the outcome and have someone favorably inclined towards them to take over?
Yes, they are definitely pushing for elections. Sorry. Moscow is definitely pushing for elections. Moscow is definitely saying that they are mentioning that in all of their demands that they are voicing, that we need to make elections possible. We need to make a deal with the president and the government that is legitimate, says President Putin, who has been running the country since 2000. So it's definitely on the list of their demands, because they believe that whoever's going to come is not going to be as actively anti-Russian as President Zelensky now is. The reality is, and that's very unusual Ukrainian situation, we did have presidents who came to power and they would claim that, yeah, we should be friendly with Russia, right? President Zelensky was actually one of those people. When he was elected, he said, I will make peace with Russia. I believe there is a big possibility for peace, and so on and so forth. He was one of those presidents. But when they get to power and they start dealing with Russians and actually see how the Russians are treating us, how they're seeing us, they all end up being very much on a different side of history. The only president who didn't realize that was President Yanukovych, and he ended up escaping into Russia.
Right.
So is Russia pushing for that? Yes. Do we understand that this is a threat? Yes, because Russia will definitely try to manipulate elections. They will, give money to whoever will be ready to voice any pro-Russian stances and so on and so forth. I think they will be putting lots of money into because the truth is there are. The numbers are unclear, but let's say even 1 million people with the Ukrainian passports living in Russia for many years. I think they will try to use those people as well. So we have to think about what do we do with those people. People with the Ukrainian passports living in Russia for, let's say 10 years, 15 years, that there are those people who chose to live in Russia. So I think they will use all available opportunities to influence the outcome of the elections. So we just have to keep that in mind and be very well prepared for that.
On that note, I want to thank you again for your time. My best to you and your family as always. Hope things work out very soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.